So I just got to start on a couple of my winter projects. One of the big projects here is to take both of the trailers and scratch them up with a wire brush and just put a good coat of rust inhibiting paint on them. It's been way too long for this trailer. And as I got started on it, I found a couple other things that I thought might be kind of interesting, so I thought I'd just put up a video. So I've had this trailer for probably 5 years, and I haven't done much to it other than just weld on a couple of things. One for hooking up chains and tying down loads, another one for putting stakes in there for putting temporary sides on it. But you can see it really needs some help. It's rusty. Those ramps don't look like they've ever had paint. So I thought I'd give it a quick once over with some paint to help protect it. But as I pulled the wheels off and got started on things, I discovered a couple other things that really need attention. Number one, I don't know if you can see this very well. Let me get some light on this. Okay, here we go. If you take a look at this brace that supports the middle of the fender, it's made out of what looks like maybe 1 by 2 or 3 tubing. And as you get down toward the bottom, it's actually just completely gone. It's rusted away. And if we look at the opposite side, you can see it even from here. Right down there. It's actually rusted all the way through as well. So I think I'm going to replace these. The other thing I discovered as I got into this is that shackle is really wallowed out pretty bad. I imagine there's a lot of play in this thing. And I think the bushing inside those springs are bad too. So I'm going to go around and look at each and every one of these, try to assess the condition, and probably have to put bushings in all the springs, and at least a couple of the shackles are going to have to be replaced along with the bolts. I think I'm going to need new bolts too. All right, I'm on the opposite side now. Pull both wheels off. This shackle actually looks pretty good, as well as this one, but I'm still going to take those apart and examine them. At a minimum, I probably need bushings. But I'm really glad, well, by the way, yeah, we got the same problem here with this support. It's much worse shape on this side. But I'm really glad I started looking into this, because here's something I found. Look at that rust hole right there, and this is in the pivot between the two axles. So that one, I don't know how soon that would fail, but that looks like it could fail very easily. So now I have to see if I can find a replacement for this pivot. All right, I've got both axles dropped, front and rear, because I needed to go through everything. Here were my tools of choice. Impact wrench for the cooperative ones. For those that were less cooperative, I added a little bit of heat. And for the completely uncooperative, yeah, they got hit with the grinder. All right, I found one more thing I want to address. You notice on this axle I've only got one U-bolt, and on the other side they've got a couple of bolts and a plate that they stuck in its place. They're kind of bent over, and U-bolts aren't very expensive and they're pretty easy to replace, so I think I'm going to order one of those up too. All right, we're all disassembled. Let's take a look at some of these parts now and see what the wear looks like on them. Let's start with one of these studs. These studs, the spec on these are 9/16 inch. This one is under a 1/2 inch through this part. Here's another one. You can see it's just been digging into the shackle. Speaking of shackles, some of these shackles, the holes are way too big and elongated. Those are no good. This one's kind of interesting. You notice how thin it is here and how it's kind of worn at an angle. I'm sure that's from misalignment due to wear on these other parts. And then the worst, scariest part is the pivots here. This is the worst of the two, but you can see it's rusted through here. This is supposed to be a solid piece. There's a lot of flex in there, not much life left in it. And then this is what's really interesting, is that this center hole is supposed to be right here. It's worn its way all the way down to this point. And it's because when this thing is on the trailer, the weight pushes down on that pin. So it's worn all the way through these. These outside holes, just the opposite. The weight would be carried on the top. And so these holes have elongated this way. So if you have a trailer, especially an old trailer, I suggest you take a look at this, because I don't think you want to run down the road with something like this. So while we're waiting on suspension parts, let's get started on these braces. All right, I need a couple of pieces of square tubing to replace this sorry piece of metal. Now I measured this one. This measures out at 2 inches by 1 inch. And I guess if I look at this end, it's a pretty stout piece of metal. And really it's just to brace that fender. So I don't have anything that is exactly this size, but I continue to salvage pieces off of this old treadmill. I was gonna scrap this stuff, and then I thought better and hung on to some of it. And these pieces right here on this end piece, this thing is pretty strong. I think this is what held the motor and the I guess the foot pad or the belt portion attached to this. And if you look at this stuff, it's nice and thick. This measured out at 2 inches by 1.5 inches, so I know I've got room for this piece. So this is what I'm going to use. I'll probably just take this top bar off, cut it in two, and I should have both sides. All right, I'm done with the braces. I swapped these out for these. Those are in nice and solid. That's not going anywhere. You know, some projects start out as just a simple fix and they just keep expanding. This one started out as just a quick wire wheel and a repaint, and I'm already into both of the axles and all the suspension and fixing braces on the fenders. And at this point, I think I'm going to pull the deck off. This plywood is pretty old and it's pretty rotten in places. I think this is probably the best time to get that off of there and get a good look at everything underneath before I paint it. I got the whole deck off, and this is not bad. It's a really stout deck. They basically took big thick angle irons and moved them. There's a little bit of scale here, but that's not bad. I'll wire wheel this and I'll be able to paint this. It's not going to be pretty, but it does look solid. So I'm pretty happy with this. And I could just leave it this way, but if I ever want to haul dirt or mulch or anything with this thing, I'm going to want a deck on there. So I think what I'll do is just pick up a couple of sheets of treated 4x8 plywood. That's all it's going to take is 2 sheets to cover this. While I'm waiting for parts, I'm going to get to the ugly job of stripping some of the rust off of this. Now I know I can't strip it down to bare metal, but I'll try to get the flaky stuff off, and then I'll treat it with a rust converter before I paint it. So I'd already pulled the axles off, so I threw just one axle and wheel back on just to have something to roll it. And I'm going to take this thing outside and get started. Now that I've got a good start on this, let's take a little archaeological look at it. I'm seeing multiple layers of paint. I got blue and red underneath that. So this thing, I believe, started life out as a red trailer and then went to blue. Boy, they laid it on thick too. But what's interesting is these fenders don't show any sign of red. So I can only guess that these fenders were replaced at one time, long after it was blue. So I don't know if I'd say I'm halfway there, but nearly halfway there. Just have to keep at it. Alright gang, it's stripped down as far as I'm going to take it. It's structurally sound. It should hold paint at least for a while. And this thing kicked my butt. I've got one more smaller trailer to do too, and it's in much better shape. these axles had a lot of scale on them, so I thought I'd hit them real quick and shoot a coat of paint on them. So I started this out by using Crud Cutter. This is a product that comes from Rust-Oleum, but it's a rust converter. So what you have to do is get all the loose rust off, and then you paint this on, and it converts that rust to kind of a hard black finish that can be painted. So I did that yesterday, and it did a pretty decent job. So I've hit the whole thing now, at least everywhere I intend to paint with this material, and now it's ready for paint. All right, we're ready for paint. Now this is probably a couple hours of painting, so I can just roll the camera and put out a really long video. This is probably getting pretty long already. I could speed it up, knock it down to maybe 15 minutes. That might be interesting. Or I could just throw some paint at it. So yeah, let's just do that. That's it, all done. That was quick and easy. All my trailer parts finally came in. So let's take a look at what we've got here. These are, I think, what they call the equalizers. So I want to start by making sure these match up, and they do, but they're actually made out of, looks like cast iron instead of this folded steel. So I think these are going to work great, and they have bushings in them. I got my U-bolt, so I'll be replacing that. The shackles, those match up, looking good. And these bolts, yep, it's exactly the right parts. All right, let's put these shackles together. Now these bolts have a knurled end, and the reason for that is to lock it into this shackle so that the bolt doesn't turn in the shackle and wear it out. We want the bolt to stay in the same position in the shackle, and what you want is all of that swivel and movement to happen between the bolt and this bushing. So let's just knock these in and lock them into place. Okay, so those are locked in. Now, a friend of mine had another suggestion because I had noticed that some of these actually had started spinning. These knurls will kind of hold it in place, but he said if I can, I should try to tack weld these in just as an extra precaution. So I think I'll take care of that right now. Now that it's back on its tires, something doesn't look right. I think this thing sits way too high. Now here's something I was kind of wondering about anyway. If you look at these shackles here, they look kind of wonky. Something's not right. Let's go back and look at what the old one looked like. Oh yeah, there it is. Okay, I got to get these things to hang from that equalizer instead of being underneath there. All right, that's better. I just had to run the jack up on one side and get this one to flip, and then a little bit on that side, and that one flipped. And the ride height is right now. All right, so we're looking pretty good. I picked up my plywood, and that wasn't cheap. $105 for 2 sheets of 1/2-inch treated plywood. So let's get that installed. It's all done. Got the deck on there. That worked out really good. Should last a good long time. Now, before I take it outside for a better look in the light, I got one last thing I need to do. I bought this 5 or 6 years ago, and I bought it with a bill of sale. So I had to apply for a new title, and they gave me a new VIN and gave me this sticker to put on, but I waited because I knew I was going to be painting it eventually. Now that it's been painted, I can put the VIN sticker on and make it official. So we'll put it down here out of harm's way. All done. Let's get a good look at this thing.